do a review in Likutei Sichos in Chelik Chof Aleph. This is in volume 21. This is the third Sicha for the Parshas Mishpatim. It's a Rashi Sicha in which the Rebbe explains the pasuk towards the end of the Parshas Mishpatim, in which it says that Moshe Rabbeinu first wrote down the Kol Divrei HaTorah, that he wrote down all the Divrei Hashem, and then he says that he read. And then the pasuk says that he read from the Sefer Habris. So the question is, what exactly did Moshe Rabbeinu write down? Rashi seems to say the same explanation in both places, both in when he wrote, that he wrote from the beginning of the Torah, from the Parshas Bereshis, until Matan Torah, and also the mitzvahs of Morah. The Rebbe explains basically that according to Rashi, there was two kinds of writing. There was the actual writing of the psukim, the way we have them, and then we have a second writing. That's why Rashi says v'kosav of the mitzvahs. It also explains the question that Tosfos has. The Rebbe will explain. The Rebbe has in Halacha and in also in the Yen Shel Torah, but we'll go step by step. Aleph. From pasuk Korev l'Seif Parshasenu, on the verse close to the end of our parsha. At the end of Parshas Mishpatim, it says, "Vayichtav Moshe," as called Divrei Hashem. That Moshe wrote down everything that Hashem said. Now, what exactly did Moshe Rabbeinu write down? So Rashi brings down the words of the pasuk that Moshe wrote. And he explains what he wrote was Mibreshis, starting from Bereshis, that's the beginning of Chumash Bereshis, Ba'ad Matan Torah, until the Matan Torah, because this that Moshe Rabbeinu is telling them is by Matan Torah. According to Rashi, as we will see, this was before Matan Torah, the way Rashi learns. So at Matan Torah, so he wrote him everything from Bereshit until Matan Torah, but also because of mitzvahs shenitztavu b'morah. In Morah, they were given special mitzvahs, the mitzvahs of Shabbos, the Parah Aduma, Kibud Aveim. We say in the pasuk in Aser Sediris Kasher Sichos Hashem Elokecha, Rashi will say, is in Morah. So there were mitzvahs that the Yidden wanted to stop in Morah. So they wrote down the regular and also mitzvahs and itztavu b'morah. This will be all explained in the Rebbe's explanation. The Rashi says v'kosav mibreshis v'ad matan Torah, not umitzvahs and itztavu, but v'kosav, another v'kosav, because as we'll see, these are two separate ways of the written word, as the Rebbe will explain in the Sicha. But first, the Rebbe wants to know, where does Rashi really know that this is what Moshe Rabbeinu wrote down? The Rebbe says, we see that it says, as told Divrei Hashem, talks about very limited things. Just to be few psukim earlier, it talks about the mitzvahs Hagbolo, Prisha. Where does Rashi know that as called Divrei Hashem means the whole story from Bereshis until here? It doesn't seem like that should really be included. It's mostly a story. It's not even Divrei Hashem. It's a story about what took place from Bereshis. So why does Rashi say that? Let me see. We get it. As spoken already many times. Is Rashi b'pirusha la Torah mefarish pshuta shel mikra? Rashi, in his commentary on the Torah, explains the simple meaning of the verse. Darpman verstehen, so we need to understand what is der hechrech im pshuta shel mikra. What forces us? What is the evidence in the simple meaning of the pasuk as Moshe had geschrieben alle inyonim, that Moshe wrote all matters mi Bereshis v'ad Matan Torah, from Bereshis ad Matan Torah. And the fact we call them Divrei Hashem, it also doesn't mashma. Afal pi v'surubam is besignan funa sibur. The majority of the Torah is in a style of a story. Unit besignan for Divrei Hashem. It's not in the style. Those were Hashem's words. It's like a third person telling a story. The Bereshis bara Elikim, etc. About what happened. It's not the words of Hashem speaking. And Rashi says it includes from Bereshis bara. And then Rashi says, "When oich mitzvah shenitztavu b'mora." In addition, also the mitzvahs that they were started, that they were commanded in Mora, before they came to Har Sinai, the mitzvahs were there. So, how do we know unita tail from them alam? Maybe just a part of all this, maybe not the whole from Bereshis bara. Or that under the divrei havaya, maybe other words of Hashem. How does Rashi know in Pshat that this is what the divrei Hashem means? Nochmer. And if you take a look just a few psukim before, divrei Hashem means the mitzvahs prisha v'agbola doesn't mean the whole ma from Bereshis. Nochmer, in Posik do state, vayichtav Moshe is called divrei Hashem. So the exact words he wrote is all of the words of Hashem. There's a Loshem State in Afridic Apostle. This is the exact language which is written in a previous pasuk. It's the exact same Loshem. As called Divrei Hashem. He told him all the Divrei Hashem. But Rashi Taich Dort, over there Rashi explained what is this called Divrei Hashem. It's called Divrei Hashem, mitzvah spiritual v'agbola. That was the mitzvah of separation and the mitzvah of limitation and not going to the mountain. The separation from their wives and the limitation of not coming to the mountain. Tovos is their tam, lishan is them pirush. So what's the reason to change the meaning from Vayichtav Moshe? It's called Divrei Hashem. In our posik, Moshe says Divrei Hashem. In them posik, from the pirush and Friedrich posik, from the interpretation of the previous posik. Before Divrei Hashem means mitzvah v'agbola. So why don't we say when Moshe says he wrote Divrei Hashem means the mitzvah v'agbola? Well, one can argue. Why would Moshe Rabbeinu have to write down for generations something which was just important for that point? Does not mashma. It's mashma that he wrote down something which is important for the future. Afilim is a learner. Even if one would learn, as vibal, das mitzvahs perisha v'agbola is given on ein molikerinya. Since the mitzvah of separation and limitation was a one-time matter, al sachona to Matan Torah, that was a preparation Matan Torah, is the fanit mistaber. That's why it's not really logical. Nor if them batzitzich der vayichtav Moshe, that just on those mitzvahs applies vayichtav Moshe. Was ksivas Moshe, because when Moshe is writing advice of an inyan was his negei of shpeter, that points to a matter which is important for later on. Why do you write something down? Are they not only for later on, they're noch merakvius l'doyre, set for generation. So the mitzvah, if he wrote down the mitzvah Prishak Bola, it's not logical. Why would he write down those mitzvahs, which was something which happened only for the preparation of Matan Torah? So maybe that's why Rashi has to say something different. He can't say Divrei Hashem, the Prishak Bola. Kem and doch lernen, so we can still learn as the Vayichtav Moshe is koilel, that this Moshe's writing includes zusammen mit mitzvahs Prisha v'agbola, together with the mitzvah of separation and limitation that we learned before. Oich de ala diburim vazayin gekumen, also the other sayings that came al sahagdom zu Matan Torah as an introduction to Matan Torah. But also things that they were talking happened at that time before Matan Torah, but there's also matters which are important for later on. Wie der Bechaya learned, as the Bechaya learns, as Vayichta Moshe's called Divrei Hashem meant. What does it mean? Vayichta Moshe Divrei Hashem. Hatanoi, those the condition that the Eibishter made and said before Matan Torah, he said, "V'hoyim shemoya tishmu v'koylu shmartem es b'nisi v'goymer." If it will be that if you listen to my voice and you'll keep my covenant, those were the things that are written down in the Sefer. But that's at least with the Prisha V'Agbola, which is said before, part of the Divrei Hashem. And here Rashi says something totally different. That we're talking about from Bereshis to Matan Torah and Mitzvah and Nitztavu B'Morah. And the Rebbe says in Beis that if you take a look in the Mechilta, which has a similar interpretation, like Rashi over there, it's actually three opinions, and Rashi says like the first two and bunches them up. Seems like totally different. Based it me is noch gresser. The surprise about this is even greater. But Dugma zum Pirush Rashi gefindt man in Mechilta. Similar to Rashi's commentary, we also find in the Mechilta. Aber Rashi is Mishane from Mechilta, but Rashi changes. Rashi changes from Mechilta. Often as the Pirush for Rashi is the Leikiman in such a way that Rashi does not come like anyone that is in the Mechilta. The Mechilta brings three days. The Mechilta brings three opinions. First, Rabbi Yossi Barabasi Omer. Rabbi Yossi Barabasi says, what is the Likutei as called Moshe, as called Divrei Hashem? What is the Divrei Hashem? So Rabbi Yossi Barabasi says, Mitchilas Bereshis v'ad kan, from the beginning of Bereshis till here. Rabbi Omer, Rabbi says, no, mitzvahs shenitztava Odom Harishon, the mitzvahs that Odom Harishon was instructed. Mitzvahs shenitztavu b'nei Noach, the mitzvahs that the b'nei Noach were commanded. Mitzvahs shenitztavu b'Mitzrayim, and the mitzvahs that they were commanded in Egypt. Ubemora, ushar kol mitzvahs kulm, and all other mitzvahs. So we're talking about not mibreshis, but mitzvahs. All mitzvahs were recorded in Moshe Divrei Hashem. Then we have the third opinion of Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel says, "B'tchilas ha'inyan mahu omer." He says, what does it say in the beginning of this portion? It says, "B'shav sa'aretz Shabbos laHashem sheishonim tizras adecho," that the earth should rest on Shabbos, on the year of Shemitah, 6 years tizras adecho, and then you have the level of, then you have Shabbos. So he says, therefore, that's the beginning opening of that in the Parshas Mishpatim, when it says, in which it says Vayichtai, that he wrote, it's called Divrei Hashem. So it starts over there with the mitzvah of Shemitah, and that is what he wrote down in the Torah. Brachos v'klol Shemitah v'yevlet. Brachos v'klol b'sefer inyan. Actually, he was talking about the Parshas Bahar and the Parshas in Bechukosai, where the Parsuk first says, "B'shav sa'aretz Shabbos laHashem sheishon tis'udecho," and then we have also the Brachos v'klolos, and the blessings and the curses, b'sefer inyan mahu omer, and then in the end of the Parshas Bechukosai it says, "Eila chukim v'mishpatim v'hatoros." So this is all the chukim, mishpatim, and the Torahs. So it's like here saying, "Vayichta Moshe" is called Divrei Hashem. Those are the Torahs. Amru mekablim ono aleinu. They said that we accept upon us. So that was actually what he told them. The Shmitas, the chukim mishpatim, and they accept upon them. But that's a third opinion over there in the Mechilta. So Rashi is aber mitzarev the erste zwei days zusammen. Rashi combines the two first opinions. First of all, that he wrote it from Bereshis till Matan Torah. So he's not going like either one of them. He brings down 1 and 2 together, so he's not like the Mechilta says. Now, even if one is going to argue that the second opinion in the Mechilta adds to the first one, but in the second opinion Mechilta, we have so much other mitzvahs which is not mentioned in Rashi, so Rashi doesn't go like that opinion. I feel if Rashi letting them shot in Mechilta, even if Rashi learns that the interpret meaning in the Mechilta, as Rabbi is not shoylo the erste day that Rabbi is not negating, rejecting the first opinion. Not a kum meisiv zayin fear, but he's coming to add to it. As in Zugov to Mitchilas Bereshis v'ad kan. That in addition to the beginning of Bereshis to here, Zayin in der Ksiva Nichel Gevorn, in this writing, also include the mitzvah shenitztava Adam Harishon. That's the way we learning in the Mechilta, that he says it also includes the mitzvahs that Adam Harishon was commanded. But we can't say that this is Rashi's source. But Rabbi rechen nit nor the mitzvah shenitztava b'mora, because Rabbi, the second opinion, doesn't just count the mitzvahs of Mora. Rashi says mitzvahs shenitztava Mora, nor al ibrike mitzvahs, also the other mitzvahs. Rashi bringt nit. Also the mitzvah Rashi does not bring them down. That means, according to Rashi, that wasn't written. So Rashi cannot say that the Mechilta brings the second opinion, Rebbe includes the first one, because then he should have brought down all the other mitzvahs. Rashi just brings down the mitzvah shenitztavu b'moreh. And the Chlal, the Rebbe said, Neisif lozeh, it's in addition to that, to say that the source of Rashi is the Mechilta is really on another pasuk. We have first by us, we hear the pasuk Vayichtav Moshe. Moshe wrote it down, and later on the pasuk, a few psukim later, it says that Moshe Rabbeinu read the Sefer Habris, and this is the Mechilta's interpretation is on the pasuk that he took the Sefer Habris and that he read it into the pack for the people. Neisiv lazeh. So Bechlal schwer zu sagen, generally it's difficult to say as Pirush Rashi do is genumen von, that Rashi here is taken from or based on, or the miyusud of the Mechilta on the Mechilta. Warum the Mechilta is mefarish nit dem posuk vayichtav Moshe. The Mechilta does not explain the word vayichtav Moshe, nor dem posuk explains the pasuk vayikach sefer habris vayikra ba'oznei ha'am. The second pasuk that he took that sefer of the covenant and he read it in the ears of the people, to the people. Und sagt, and Mechilta says, avaloi shomane mehechi kara ba'ozneim, but we don't know from where he read in their ears. So that means while he read from the Sefer Habris, but it doesn't say precisely from which part of the Sefer Habris he read. That says, in Mechilta redt sich nit wegen der Kesiva, and the Mechilta is not discussing the writing, was hat Moshe geschrieben in dem Sefer, that which Moshe wrote in the Sefer. But wegen dem was Moshe hat geleint, which Moshe read. Von dem Sefer was Nehom, from this Sefer in the ears of the people. So it's talking about what parts of the Sefer he wrote. The Mela is the funkin that I need vayichtav Moshe. So that doesn't prove the Mechilta, what he says that he read doesn't prove what Moshe wrote. As Ken Zain, as in the Kesiva, it's possible that in the writing of Moshe Koilul given merer vi in their Kriya, that in the writing Moshe included more than in the reading. The Mechilta actually says that if you precisely the language of the Mechilta, he's not saying that he read the whole Sefer. He says, Lo shamanu mehechan in them Sefer Korah. We don't know where within the book he read. So the fact that he says there that he read these parts doesn't mean that that was written. So it can't be Rashi's trying to prove what was written. Cannot be from what the Mechilta writes about what was read. But either way, is move on from Vanet and Rashi Bipshunta Shemikra. But where does Rashi take whatever the source is, even if he's Mechilta, not Mechilta, but how does Rashi know in the simple meaning of the verse? As the Vayicht of Moshe, it says Moshe Rodan is given me Bereshis, Vad Matan Torah, and Mitzvah Shenitztav B'Moreh, that this was what it was included in the writing, the mitzvah from Bereshis Matan Torah, and the mitzvahs that they were commanded in Morah. Ois Gimel. Weiter from Posik, then later on in the verse, Vayikach Sefer Habris, Vayikra Bosnei Ha'am. So Moshe Rabbeinu took the Sefer of the Covenant, and then he reads it to the people, in the ears of the people. Is Rashi Mefarish the Werter Sefer Habris? Rashi explains the words, the book of the covenant, and he says basically, as he has said, that what is written down, Mibreshis Vad Matan Torah, from Bereshis to Matan Torah, umitzvahs shenitztavu b'morah, and the mitzvahs they were commanded in Morah. Der Tam, so why does Rashi B'chlal have to repeat the same thing? Der Tam, the reason was Rashi darf do B'chlal zogen apirush. Why is it necessary for Rashi to even comment over here, if Sefer Habris on the book of the covenant, is moving? That much we understand. Weil früher wird nicht der Mond, because previously when it says he wrote the Divrei Hashem, it's not mentioned as does was Moshe had geschrieben, that which Moshe has written is given der Sefer Habris, that it was the book of the covenant. Daf Rashi optaichen as Hainu Hach, so Rashi needs to translate that this is the same book that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote, that this is the Sefer Habris. But why does Rashi have to repeat the exact details which was already said before? We need to, however, understand why does Rashi need to repeat over here the alle protim, all the details was hat schon gesagt by Vayichta Moshe, that he had already said by what Moshe wrote. From Bereshis to Matan Torah, the mitzvahs that they were commanded in Morah. He should have only said, as das is der Sefer shekosav Moshe, that this is the Sefer that Moshe has written. Similar to the language of the Rashbam over here, it says Sefer Habris, Diksiv L'mayla v'yichtav Moshe v'goymer. Says before Yichtav Moshe, this is the Sefer Habris. That's all that Rashi needed to say, rather than telling you what was included in the Sefer Habris. We could say, maybe because if we would have just said that this is the book, but we won't know how much of it he read, and Rashi's trying to say that he read the whole thing, whatever was there written. We could say that Rashi needs to count out specifically what was included. But in Pasuk states tam. In Pasuk it just says plain. Vayikach Sefer Habris. He took that Sefer, the book of the covenant. Vayikra Bosnei Ha'am. He read it to the ear of the people. Estate obernit vos und wiful Moshe hat verzegeleint. It doesn't say what and how much of it did Moshe read for them. Ubeshoin ha-Mechilta now, and as we quoted the language of the Mechilta earlier, we don't hear, we don't know from where he read. The Riber git Rashi Tzuvis, and that's why Rashi lets us know as those vos had geleint is given that which he read was Mibreshis v'ad Matan Torah u'mitzvahs shenitztavu b'morah, starting from Bereshis until Matan Torah. and the mitzvahs that they were instructed in Mora, which means the ganzen Sefer HaBris. He read it all, the entire Sefer HaBris. So maybe that's why Rashi wants to say that. We can't really say that that's the reason, and that's what Rashi means. While if Rashi gedarft stellen auf the Wörter Vayikra, based on this, Rashi should have explained what did he read. It says Vayikra ba'oznei ha'am, so he has to say what he read. Und der Reif sagen, and on that he should say as Vayikra meint the Bereshis that he read from Bereshis. Rashi stellt sich aber auf the Wörter Sefer HaBris. Rashi bases himself on the words, the Book of the Covenant. And even more than that, there is a feeling he doesn't even say, etc. To go on the show on the continuation of the pasuk that he read from the people in the Sefer HaBris, all of it was their funish movement. When that is understood, it just means these words alone, only Sefer HaBris. As a result from Mefarazai, nit was Vayikra, not that which he read, nor welchen Sefer the pasuk meant with Sefer HaBris, but rather he's coming to tell us which is the book what the pasuk is referring to as the Sefer HaBris. Is Hadra Kusha Luduchta. So we come back to the question: to believe was Chazer Rashi Iber Zayin Pirush Beprotius? Why does Rashi translate, repeat his interpretation? What it means, the Sefer HaBris, specifically in detail, the two from Bereshis and the mitzvahs of Mora. And the Rebbe is going to explain this based on the diuk in the first Rashi. The Rashi adds the word v'kosav from Bereshis, and he wrote mitzvahs of Mora, and not Bereshis and mitzvahs of Mora, as in the second Rashi. It says v'kosav. And the Rebbe is going to explain really that it depends when this psukim are talking about. According to Rashi, this is Lifnei Matan Torah. According to the Ramban, it's after Matan Torah. According to Rashi, it's limited to the Nyonim that Rashi says that were before Matan Torah. Let me look inside. Dalet. Wenn das verstehen behagdim noch hadiyik in Lashon Rashi in dem Frier de Pirush Hanal. By first introducing another issue, another specifics in Rashi's language in the previous Rashi, as called Divrei Hashem. It says Vayichtav Moshe meBereshis ba'ad Matan Torah. He wrote from Bereshis ba'ad Matan Torah, and then it says V'kosav mitzvah shenitztavu b'morah. And he wrote the mitzvahs that they were commanded in Morah. The L'cheire is the word v'kosav iberik. It would seem that the word v'kosav is extra. Rashi is based himself that Moshe wrote, so it knows that he wrote. It would be sufficient, just the vav mitzvahs. Bebereshis ba'ad Matan Torah mitzvahs shenitztavu b'morah, not v'kosav, but mitzvahs shenitztavu b'morah. It would be understood on alone as those outs is nichlal in them vayichtav. This is all part of the vayichtav. Is the bir bazed? There is two separate writings over here. Wegen klolus haparsha v'el Moshe Omar Alei al Hashem Gomer. This is what we learn now in Shvi in Mishpatim in the Torah. This is set up after Matan Torah, which is in Parshas Yisrei. So when did this take place? Al Moshe Omar Alei al Hashem is farana machlokes v'shem meforshe haTorah. There is a disagreement between the Torah commentators. When the parsha is gezogen, when was this portion said? When seinen vorgekommen de alle murois wegen welche the parsha read, and when all the happenings took place that the parsha discusses over here in the end of Mishpatim. Rashi learns as parsha zu nemra koidem aseres hadibros. She learns that this portion was said before the 10th saying, before the Parshas Yisrael. Ubedaled b'Sivan nemar loy alei, and this was on the 4th of Sivan, before Matan Torah. was said to him, Alei val Moshe Omer Alei, which speaks about in the Parshas Mishpatim. Das heißt, but that would mean that when as euch der Vayichtav Moshe is given b'yem Dalet, that when did Moshe write it down? It was on the 4th of Sivan. Und andere Sachen, wie bei ihm Mizbeach v'chulu, and other matters that he built the Mizbeach, which is all related in the Parshas Mishpatim, it all on the Forgikum b'yem Hei Sivan. They took place on the Yem Hei b'Sivan, on the 5th day of Sivan. Das Haramban, that's Rashi's opinion. Das Haramban ve'oid, according to the Ramban and others, is those als vorgekommen, noch das Seres Hadibris, noch Matan Torah. It's actually in order in Parshas Mishpatim that was after the 10 saying. It was after Vav Sivan, after the Torah was given, after the 10 commandments, after Matan Torah. So mitzad der Machloikis in the Zman, when the Parsha is gesagt worden, because of this disagreement, in the time that this Parsha was said, kommt euch a reisa shinui in a pirush from dem posik. It also brings about a change in the interpretation of this verse. When it says Vayovei Moshe vayisaper lohem as kol divrei havaye ves kol hamishpatim, that Moshe came and related to them all the words of Hashem that the Rebbe quoted before as kol divrei Hashem rishav agbola, and all the mishpatim. So Lloyd Rashin made called Divrei Hashem. What does it mean? All the words of Hashem, Kinal, as we said earlier, the mitzvah Pirisha V'Agbola, the mitzvah of separation and limitation. Unve'ez kol ha-mishpatim, what is meaning and kol mishpatim? The Zayin mitzvahs shenitztavu b'nei Noach, the 7 mitzvahs that the b'nei Noach were commanded. And that's the 7 mitzvahs of Noach, and Shabbos, and Kibud Ava'im, Upara Aduma, and also Vidinim, those are Mishpatim that were given, Shenit Mulam B'Morah, that were given to Morah. What's Sichos to say is called Mishpatim? If we're talking before Matan Torah, we didn't have yet all the Mishpatim of the Torah. So that would specifically talk about the 7 mitzvahs B'nai Noach, which is written in the Chumash earlier. And by Shabbos, there's a reference that Kashet Simcha B'Morah and Kibud Ava'im, Kashet Simcha Hashem L'Kiachon, Pora Aduma, and the Wadinim Shenit Lam B'Morah. These were the specifics that was the Mishpatim that was included. The discussion about the Zayin mitzvahs, were they Mora or not, but that's another discussion in the footnote over here, number 15. So according to Rashi, that's what it's meant by kol hamishpatim. But according to the opinion of the Ramban, that it's all after Matan Torah, der mit kol divrei Hashem. What does it mean, divrei Hashem? You meant those was der Eibishter had gesagt noch Matan Torah. That's which Hashem has said after the Torah was given. Hashem says, Atem ri'isem ki min hashamayim goymer. You have seen that min hashamayim, that I spoke to you, which is after Matan Torah, of course. Umid kol ha-mishpatim, what means all the mishpatim? Ganz parshas mishpatim, the whole section of mishpatim, which was after Matan Torah, bitzu der parsha vel Moshe Omar, till the parsha when he says the Moshe Omar, alei, which was taking place after Matan Torah. Und oder chiluk zwischen den 2 Days bringt euch a chiluk in dem Teuchen von dem Bris. So this 2 opinions also makes a difference in the idea, in the content of the covenant. It's called the Sefer HaBris. In Yonif HaBris, what is the idea of a covenant is to verstarken, is to strengthen dem Kishur v'chibur, the tie and the connection zwischen die, welche seinen sich mishtatev in dem Bris, amongst those who participate in the covenant. Who are the ones over here that are participating in the covenant? The Yidden mit Torah. The Yidden with Torah are being connected. was durch der Teure, was der Eberster hat sie gegeben, werden sie verbunden euch mit dem Ebersten. That through the Torah that Hashem gave them, they become connected to Hashem. So the Sefer Habris is connecting Yidden with Torah, and through the Torah that Hashem gave, they become tied to the Yibshu itself. If he says, move on according to this understood, as Leid Rashi, that according to Rashi, as the bris is given far matan Torah, that the covenant was before the Torah was given, is der bris oif und durch die inyonim. This covenant is on, and through those matters, those aspects, was der Eibishter hat gegeben, die far matan Torah, which Hashem gave before matan Torah. Ubefrat, die welche kennen starken bejöser dem Verbund, the bris, those matters that can strengthen a lot that connection, that bris, such as v'koyach ma'isov higid la'amoy. Hashem gives over the power of his actions to his people, as Rashi says right in the beginning of Breshis Boro, that he created everything and he's in charge of everything. This is starting from Breshis Chodesh Hazeh. So that was the things that are strengthening that's the covenant. Und der Bris is given als Hachone v'Hagdome zu Matan Torah Aseres Hadibros Chul. And that covenant was a introduction, a preparation, an introduction to Matan Torah Aseres Hadibros. All of Breshis to Lachedesh. Over Ledas Ramban ve'Eid. But according to Ramban and others, is the Bris given Biker verbunden mit den Dibris v'Tzivuyim, was der Ebish hat gesagt noch Matan Torah. That the covenant is mainly tied with those sayings and commands that Hashem said after Matan Torah. So Lifizeh is move on. So according to this understood, when der Posuk sagt Vayichtov Moshe, he says Moshe wrote the Ksiva from them Sefer Habris. That Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the writing of a Sefer of Covenant, the Sefer was his Verbunden mit Bris, that is a book which is tied to a covenant. The Gizok weiter in the Parsha, the Pasuk says, he wrote the Divrei Hashem, which became the Sefer Habris that we read. Werd gemeint like Pirush Rashi. So according to Rashi, it means, as er hat geschrieben, the Kol Divrei Hashem. He wrote down all the words of Hashem. Was seinen Shoin bis damals gesagt geworden zu ihnen, that have already been up till then told to the Yidden. The Hainu mi Breshis va Matan Torah, which is from Breshis till Matan Torah. Und the mitzvahs shenitztavu b'mora, everything that was already from Breshis till Matan Torah, and the mitzvahs shenitztavu b'mora. Was die Kesiva is given, nicht belois. That writing was not just so that so that they can later on read it in the ears of the people. That was part of the covenant. The fact that he wrote it down, but this became additional force. So the Eden that obligated the Eden more, and it tied to them. So that is part of the process of the bris. The writing it down makes the covenant. And this is all a covenant with everything that Hashem has already said to them and the mitzvahs that took place till then. Hey, in Apizeh Yesh Loimar, based on this, we can say, as the Tam was Rashi zetelt, the reason that Rashi splits mit v'kosav, he says from Breshis bis Matan Torah, and then it says v'kosav, debate in Yonim. He splits the two ideas here. Mi Breshis v'ad Matan Torah, from Breshis to Matan Torah, u'mitzvah shenitztavu b'mora, and he says v'kosav in between. Is valdo seinen zwei ifane kesiva, These are two separate styles of writing. Aleph, mi Bereshis vad Matan Torah, from Bereshis Matan Torah, the Sipur Hamurois, relating the happenings from Bria Soilam businessman from Matan Torah, from the time that the world was created, from Bereshis Bara until my time of Matan Torah, Hodzei Roiv Rubam. So then the majority, Moshe Dov Hashrim, Moshe wrote them down here, Besignan Ubetzura, in the style and in the shape, the way they're written in the Torah before us, the way we have in the Torah. The Mehechi Teisa, because there would be no reason to say that he wrote it anywhere else. Why would you say, why would he change? Rashi seems to imply that this was the Mibreshis Vad Matan Torah, Mibreshis, basically from the way it's written by us, Bereshis Bara Lekim. That's what he did, not just the happenings, but the actual wording, the way we have the Torah. Ebemele is dos in Geder from Sivas Parshiyas Shal Torah. So therefore, this is in the definitions and the boundaries of writing portions of the Torah. This was writing like the Torah, like we have. But then Beis, because of mitzvahs and it's b'morah. This is a separate way that he wrote the mitzvahs the way they were commanded in Morah. Was those eine the mitzvahs from Shabbos, Kibbud Avayim, keep Shabbos, honoring the father and mother, Porah Aduma v'dinim. Hat doch nicht gekannt schreiben. Moshe couldn't have written Ledugma, say for example, by Porah Aduma, so it's Chukas HaTorah. This is the statue of the Torah. Or Unesatem Oisrael Lozar HaKoyen, when it talks about, there was no Lozar HaKoyen then yet. Couldn't write it down in the signon, in the style and the format of the Torah later on. Boyd and others. Is Mistaber, so that's why it makes sense as Moshe Tzei Fashirim, that Moshe had wrote it down neat, not be'oifun und benusach, wie sie seinen später verschrieben geworden. Not in the way and in the style and the language as they were written down later on, as Parshiyas Shel Torah, which they are portions of the Torah. Nor be'oifun was gitarois dem teuchen v'inyan ha-mitzvahs. But he wrote them in a way that gives out the idea and the content of mitzvahs, like mitzvahs. Kilushain Rashi, so Rashi said because of mitzvahs, he wrote the mitzvahs. Das is nicht gewend geder ksivas parshiyos shel Torah. This was not in the boundaries of writing the portion of the Torah. Nor a geder from ksivas mitzvahs. This was writing mitzvahs. One writing was writing the parsha of the Torah, till from Breshis till HaChodesh, till Matan Torah. And another thing, he wrote down the mitzvahs. Und al derech zeh is der Unterschied, see der Vayichte Moshe. And similarly, there's also the difference whether the Vayichte Moshe is given far Matan Torah, if it was before Matan Torah, or the days as is given lacher Matan Torah, or according to the opinion that it was after Matan Torah. Lifnei Matan Torah zane given zwei inyonim. Before Matan Torah, there were two aspects. There was Parshiyas HaTorah, and mitzvahs shenichtav b'morah. There were the portion of the Torah, and then there were mitzvahs commanded in Morah. Ubemela zane eichin vayichtav Moshe. Therefore, also when Moshe wrote down, given zwei suge ksiva, the two types of writings. You know, ksivas Parshiyas HaTorah, writing the portion of the Torah. Ksivas mitzvahs and it's Morah, writing the mitzvahs that they were instructed in Morah. Nicht wie sie seinen achelik from Parshas HaTorah, not in the way in which they are a part of the portion of the Torah. But noch machen Torah aber. But if we're talking about after Matan Torah, is the talking tam zu machen achelik. There's no reason to make a distinction. Nor vayichtov. But when it says he written, alles himself, everything was written. He wrote Vayichtov, everything the same way. Euch the mitzvahs, Mishpatim, also the mitzvahs, the Mishpatim, seine geschrieben geworden durch Moshe als Parshiyas HaTorah. They were written through Moshe as portions of the Torah that contain the mitzvahs, that contain the mitzvahs. So they were written portions of the Torah. But which portions of the Torah? The portions of the Torah that contain the mitzvahs. Now the Rebbe explains in Ois Vov that when we come to the second pasuk, Sefer HaBris, Rashi has to confirm that this is Sefer HaBris, but that contain these both aspects of the Parshias and the mitzvahs. And Rebbe will also explain that's why it's the Nasa for the mitzvahs and Nishma for the Parshias. Both der mit wird verständig der Tam. So now we understand the reason. And zum Posik vayikach Sefer HaBris. When we reach the Posik that he took the Sefer of the Covenant, Rashi needs to articulate and explain what der Sefer HaBris is. What is this Sefer of the Bris? Since we learned earlier. As Moshe had geschrieben, zwei besondere Inyanim. Moshe had written down two separate matters, und zwei verschiedene Gedreksive, and two various types, definitions of writing. Und da steht Sefer HaBris. Here it says a Sefer in a language of a singular. Loshen Yochid. Daf Rashi mefarer sein. Rashi needs to explain as their Sefer HaBris, that when it says here, this Sefer HaBris, besteht von derselbe zwei Inyanim, that consists of the two same ideas. Mibreshis vad matan Torah, und mitzvah shenitztava b'moreh. The both aspects from Breshis to Matan Torah and also the mitzvah shenitztava b'moreh. Mit dem wird euch herausgebracht, and that also brings out, expresses as der Bris mit Yidden given of Beidin Yonim, that the covenant with Yidden was on these two aspects. Aleph of Torah v'limuda, on Torah and the study of Torah, but das is given durch Schreiben. That took place through writing the Bereshis vad Matan Torah, from Bereshis to Matan Torah, which is the Parshios HaTorah, the portions of the Torah. Based of Kiyum HaMitzvahs, on the observance of mitzvahs. Durch Ksivas HaMitzvah shenitztavu b'moreh, through the writing of the mitzvahs that they were commanded in Morah. That's the second study of Torah and observance of mitzvahs. And this was also sweet. Was no, then we Moshe Rabbeinu. After Moshe Rabbeinu had geleint them Sefer HaBris b'oznei ha'am, he read the book of the covenant in the ears of the people. Habdin gezogt. So what did they respond? Kol asher diber Hashem nase v'nishma. Whatever Hashem spoke, we will do and we will listen. Nase refers to b'kesher to the mitzvah shenitztavu b'moreh. What we will do is as it relates to the mitzvahs that they were instructed in Moreh. Was erhod geleint that he read. That's the first part. Unishma behemshich tzukhriyas haparshis, that is as a follow-up to reading the portions mibreshis vad matan Torah. That's learning. That's the nishma from Bereshis Matan Torah. This was the preparation and the introduction to the study of Torah observance of mitzvahs, was that they accepted Mekanul Haba. From here on, their Kabbalah Kefula, through this double acceptance from Torah and mitzvahs, the Nasa and and in the way of a covenant. So the Torah, they became fit to receive the Torah. So the Rebbe brings down from the Inyanim Ufloim Shebepirush Rashi Zeh, the wondrous matters that we see in this Rashi. In Gemara is da machloikes zwischen Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. In the Gemara we find a disagreement between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Tzi Torah Megillah Nitna. Whether the Torah was given a Megillah, portion by portion, which means The Rebbe quotes from Rashi, Kishanemra Parsha Moshe, when a portion was said to Moshe, he would write that down. Mem Shono, and at the end of 40 years, Kshenigmuru Kol HaParshis, when all of the portions have been completed, Chibram Begidum V'Tofrim, that's when he connected them through the Gidim, and he sewed them together so it became one Torah. But already each portion was written by itself. This is from Rashi. So that's the one opinion. The other opinion is that Torah Chasuma Nitna. The Torah was given sealed altogether, as bring down from Rashi. Lo nichtava ad soif mem. It has not been written down until the end of the 40 years in the desert. La'achar shenemru kol haparshis kulon. After all the parshas were said. V'hanem mores loy b'shona rishona v'shniya. That was many of the saying that were said on the first and the second year. This is 40 years later. In between, there was no dibris over there, but on the first and the second year, now it's 40 years later. They were organized orally until he wrote it down. That's Rashi. So Toysves places himself on the opinion that says that the Torah was given sealed. It was written all together at the end. How do we reconcile them? Surprising. It says that in our pasuk that he took the sefer of the covenant. So Fraktoises upirish Rashi bepirish Chumash, and Rashi explains in Chumash the Hainu Mebreshis Vatkan that was from Breshis up till here. So that means that it was already written down. It didn't take place at the end of 40 years, but it took place much before by Matan Torah. Toys answers, Venira Lefarish. So what we're going to explain, the Loika Omar Chasuma Nitno Shaloi Nichtava Ad L'Bsoif. He's not trying to say that it was given, it was all written at the end. But it means to say, Elo Shel Al HaSeder Nichtava. That then it was written and it was put together, the order was made at the end of 40 years. Which means the Yesh Parshiyeh Shenemru Tchila, there are portions that were said before in the beginning. Lifnei Oisem Maksuvim Lifneihem. So even though they appear in the Torah after, but they were said before them. So if they were written down at the time, they would have been in the wrong order, the one way we have it now. So the Torah that we have is not written according to the order the way it was said. It was written in the order that was organized after 40 years. But then it wasn't written down. So he couldn't have written it down and put it in then. He waited to write it down until the one that was written before and was set to him, so he could put it down before. And then he wrote the next one. Because I'll read this afterwards. Basically, how to put the parshas in is different than the order, than the way it was said. So if he would be writing it, putting it together as they were saying, that means that he would have the order, not the way we have the order today, but it was organized later on. So therefore, it's not a stira that this parsha Breshis was already a Sefer Abris, because this does not involve the order. That was okay. The Maharal is Masbir. Maharal explained. He says something different. He says, as Pirush Rashi b'Parsha Seinu, is nicht bestiert zum an the Omer Torah Chasuma Nitna does not contradict the opinion that says the Torah was given all together at the end of 40 years. And here we see that was written before, because this is not writing of the Torah. What you have here is Sefer Abris. So this is something different than what the Torah Chasuma Nitna. Oich l'das Rashi bepirush l'shas, as this meant le'nichtava ad seif mem. Also, according to Rashi, Rashi also says there, not only, but Rashi says that it was not even written until the end of Mem. Tosfos says it could be written before, but it was organized later on. But according to Rashi, it wasn't written until after 40 years. So how does it fit? Here we said it was written. So he answers, Vados is given tzorech mitzvah. This was for the need of a mitzvah. When the riber is einza nesinas Torah nechshav rak lekris bris. This is not considered the Torah was given. This is only to form the covenant. And taka, to write the Torah, that was done later. It wasn't written down. That was written down later on. Apian al yumtek. But based on the above, that there was two parts to that writing, to the Sefer HaBris, because although that first part from Bereshis to Matan Torah is given by from Parshas HaTorah that took the style of writing of the Parshas HaTorah, is das aber fortnit in Geder from Ksivas Parshas HaTorah. It's still not in the definition of writing the portion of the Torah. Why? Because only a part of it, because a part of it was mitzvahs, written differently, not a tale from Sefer Abris, but a portion of the Sefer Abris was what Oich enthalten, which also contained the mitzvahs in Istavu b'Moreh. They also included the mitzvahs that were instructed in Moreh. Und sie schreiben ist doch gewesen ganzen anders von der Kesiva b'Parshas HaTorah. That writing was totally different than the writing in the portion of the Torah. Und die beide zugeschrieben, then these two styles of writing, haben doch zusammengestellt ein Sefer Abris. They made up one Sefer Abris. So therefore, it's not a problem. This is not considered writing the Torah, because together Sefer Abris was not really writing of the Torah, because it was two parts to it, and one part didn't fit with the writing that was mitzvahs and Estavu b'Moreh, and therefore the Torah as a Torah, that was Chasuma Nitna done at the end of 40 years. So why does Tosfos therefore ask, if it's not the Torah reading, so why is the Torah asking from this Rashi? But at the end of the day, the Rebbe explained, since a part of it was written the Parshas, so according to Tosfos, but we can say like the Maral that it's not really, and it doesn't contradict that Torah Chasuma Nitna. Those was Tosfos fragt from the Pirush Rashi. The reason why Tosfos does ask from this Rashi is Yesh Loimar. We can say that's a Tosfos. In Tosfos' view, Tosfos' opinion, das the Parshas of Moshe Gishrim, since those portions that Moshe wrote, Mibreshis vad Matan Torah, from Bresh to Matan Torah, seine nicht anders, they are not different bitzuruson v'lashonim in their shape and in their language, with the Parshas Aksuvas La'achar Zebet Torah, than the same portions that are written later on in the Torah. These are the same as we have today, and the rest of it that we had later on. So therefore, is Afal Pias Moshe in Sefer Abris, although that Moshe in the Sefer Abris to the Metzarev given, he also added to it, he combined Oich the Mitzvah and Stavu b'Moreh on a different level style of writing. He added that also, the mitzvahs that they were commanded Moreh. They weren't written in the style of Parshas HaTorah. Is das aber nicht mevatel? Tosfos' view is that does not negate or the goreya or diminish from them was the parshas Bereshis ad Matan Torah, from the fact that the portions from Bereshis to Matan Torah zayin an inyan for Ksivas Parshas Torah, they are idea of writing the Parshas of Torah. So why would it? How could it fit with the idea that it's Torah Chasuma Nitna, that it was only written later on? And that's why Tosfos has to give his answer that it doesn't mean that not all the parshas were written. It just means the order was organized later on. So And the Rebbe says, based on this explanation, Toysus Alpizeh Yumtag was Toysus is mighty from Lashon Rashi. All that he quotes from Rashi, Mibreshis Vatkan. He doesn't bring the mitzvahs part. Und der Mott nicht, only from Breshis to the Mott nicht them seen Lashon Rashi, mitzvahs and Istavu B'morah. He does not mention the end of Rashi's language, the mitzvahs that they were commanded in Morah, but the Ksivas mitzvahs and Istavu B'morah hot kein Shaychus nit la hashakla v'tari in Toysus, because the writing of the mitzvahs that they were in the Morah, that has no connection to the discussion, the give and take in Toysus, which is talking about Parshas Torah. That's never Parshas Torah, so that part for sure. Toysus' problem is the Kashi is nor Muksivas Bereshit al Matan Torah. That part of the Sefer Habris, which is the writing from Bereshit al Matan Torah, was his ageder from Ksivas Parshas Shel Torah, which is the definition of Parshas Torah. How could we say that Torah Chasur Manitna? We saw that it was written before that part of the Sefer Habris, which was the Parshas Torah. However, according to Rashi, the Rebbe explained with the Maral, that as Rashi is over Rashi, Baal Beidin Yonik Siva. Since they both became one Sefer Abris, is a feel of the parishes with Bereshis and Matan Torah, so even the portions from Bereshis and Matan Torah, they are not writing portions of Torah, nor an inyan for Sefer Abris, it's a Sefer Abris, so it's something different. It does not conflict at all with the way the Torah was written. This was written as a Sefer Abris. Now the Rebbe Noisches brings down of Yena Shel Torah. Yena Shel Torah should be Pirush Rashi Zeh Yesh Leima. Can say the wine of Torah in this Rashi. We can say Afal Pias Klolus Inyan Abris is der Kishur v'Yischabrus zwischen die v'zei seinen zwischen die v'seine Kodesh dem Bris. Generally, the covenant is to tie and to connect those people who form the covenant. When it done in our case, this Chabrus Visachdus von Oberste mit Eden, this is the connecting and uniting from the Oberste with Eden. Is aber do achiluk in them Teichen Habris, there is still a difference in the content of this covenant. Sid the Bris is gemacht geworden lifnei Matan Torah, whether it was made before the Torah was given or the lachre Matan Torah after Matan Torah. Bis Matan Torah is given the Gezeir, until Matan Torah there was the decree as Elyonim lo yerdu letachtoinim. The uppers shall not descend to the lowers, and behatachtoinim, and the lowers lo yalo le'elyonim shall not go up to the upper. Kumtois. It turns out, as der bris from far Matan Torah, so therefore the covenant that takes place before Matan Torah is noch als gewend verbunden. It was still tied with them gavra, that was with the people, nicht mit der chefze, not with the object. There still could not be an object connection. It was just the people can connect. We say to Mizu, at sich Tage aufgetan durch Torah mitzvahs that it actually accomplished through Torah mitzvahs lifnei Matan Torah an aliyah unachibra mit neighbors. There was an elevation, there was a connection with Hashem. Das ist aber given in einem Eufem von far Matan Torah, but it was in a way that is before the Torah was given. Nit arois from Geder Tacht Nivra. They did not go out of the definition of the level of a Nivra. But according to the opinions of the Ramban, as the Bris is given, the covenant was after Matan Torah, Nochen, Allah bit like Zera, which was after the nullification of that decree of the separation. Beis Vania Maschel and the Eberster started by Yerid Hashem al Harsin of Yisera Mizu. More than just starting. The Chidush Vunan no Nafshi Ksovis Yehovis. The Eberster himself has given himself over in his writing. The Eberster Tzchalein Kaviyachol. Hashem himself, so to speak, put himself in Arangi Gem, placed himself Lenetzach V'Tomid for eternity and always in Torah. And no Nafshi Ksovis Yehovis, he put himself into the Torah. Is a move, and it's also understood as the Isachdus mit Torah, Ba'ifun Shel Bris, But this union with Torah in a way of a covenant, this impacted the ultimate and wholesome elevation, totally to exit from Geder Nivra from the definition of creation, created being. So seemingly that the bris after Matan Torah can change around the Nivra de Mato, seems like it's greater than that connection, which according to Rashi, the bris took place before Matan Torah. So the Rebbe says is over an ilu in der day that's Rashi. There is an advantage, however, in Rashi's opinion. Like Rashi, as the bris is given for Matan Torah, that this covenant was before the Torah was given. Hayos azayin dik euch demut far Matan Torah. Being that then, as was before Matan Torah, kishurim anuvim tefusim. This is the language of the Mechilta in Yisrael. That you are tied, you are bowed, and you are captured, you're held on. They connect with Torah the way it came down to the created being from Torah. With the level of godliness that came down through Torah. Is move on. As no chazah that after such a preparation is there zichur valiyas hanivroim b'matan Torah. So the refinement and the elevation of the created being by Matan Torah, even nochmer b'shleimus, it was even wholesomer. And that's why, after that preparation, then in their level, the Torah to be receiving the Torah which is higher than the Geder and Evrahim through their bris, the covenant that took place while the Yidden were still anuvim to fusim, as he said in the Lamato. Mashenkin Leididei says the bris is given lachar matan Torah, as opposed to the opinion that this covenant took place after Matan Torah, is b'shas Matan Torah given l'maylo l'gam madrigosim minyonim. So at the time the Torah given was totally higher than their level and who they are. They didn't have that preparation. When the nesinas haTorah is given mitzad l'maylo, and the David they give the Torah was Hashem gave the Torah, but it didn't connect to the people because of them. Test. You can explain this difference that the Rebbe brought down Sivhei has. Das Rashi sein in dem Vayichtov. But according to Rashi in this writing, and in the bris and the covenant given zwei inyonim, Torah mitzvahs, two separate Torah, Vibrashis ad kan, and then mitzvahs mistar b'morah, Torah mitzvahs. Although the other days is the same inyan, achelik from Torah is all part of Torah. Mitzad Geder Hanivroim, from the definition, the boundaries of the created being, Herzich is Chalkus of Torah mitzvahs. You sense a distinction, a difference, a separation Torah mitzvahs. B'meila oich in der Kabbalah von Eden, and therefore also in the acceptance of Eden, Nase bazunder will do unishma and will listen bazunder. Nase for mitzvah, nishma for Torah. Aber mitzad habayra, from the perspective of the Beire, Herzich nit kenis Chalkus, doesn't hear, doesn't sense no difference. Punkt with the Eibishter is Achdus Habshutos, just as Hashem is the simple oneness. Azoi Zoktzches Arois Oichin Torah Viziz Mitzad L'maylo. That's the way also it's expressed in the Torah as it's from above. Als is ein inyan from Torah. It's all one aspect of Torah. This is Sichos Shabbos Parshas Mishpatim Tavshin Membeis.